One special thing that is happening this reset, besides what we already talked about, which is the balance tuning that is hitting live servers on this third week of patch 10.1.5, what is actually also coming is an extra added fix from Blizzard about Augmentation Evoker. This is not, a nerf, it's not a change in game or something that will modify the spec. What is changing is, as per Blizzard's announcement, the advanced combat log now more accurately attributes support events for pet/guardian/summons damage, as well as accumulator and delayed damage effects and damage against armored targets. This is something we have mentioned before about going into the damage meters, into the damage logs in Warcraft logs to check out for augmentation, because in case you're not aware, but you should by now, the in-game damage meter add-on of your choice does not have access to the advanced combat log. And the only way for you to check the real damage of an Augmentation Evoker is to use the advanced combat log that is available on a site, a parsing site like Warcraft logs. So in-game you see much of the damage of the Augmentation Evoker being in the form of buffs to other specs, but when you go to Warcraft logs you are supposed to be seeing the full version of the damage of augmentation. Now, that was kind of weird, because when we went into the damage meters overall, like this one for example, augmentation looked like the worst parody of Assassination Rogue or Beast Mastery Hunter or maybe Fire Mage or some other super weak specs at times that they have been in the meta. It was very low, very low damage, despite being super popular. At the moment, augmentation has the second highest number of players, and yet the damage was awful. Part of that damage being awful was this problem that Blizzard is fixing. The problem is that Blizzard wasn't quite able to attribute the damage buffs of augmentation to specs, for example, with pets. Pets doing more damage based on the stats of the player, and those were not being counted as part of the extra damage being given by augmentation. And that's kind of an issue, because when you look at one of the strongest right now specs in the raid, who do you find? You find Unholy Death Knight. Unholy Death Knight is one of the specs with the highest pet damage across all specs. If you look at this, you have what? You have Army of the Dead being responsible for almost 20% of the damage. You have one of the ghouls being responsible for 14%, the gargoyle for 12%, the other part of the Army of the Dead for also 10% more. So we are talking about over 50% of the damage done by an Unholy Death Knight being part of their pet. So that one missing from the damage increase of augmentation is quite relevant. You also had other pet specs, like for example Beast Mastery Hunter, and another one is Demonology Warlock. Another one of the specs towards the top of the meters, towards the top of the rankings in the raid in particular. And if we mentioned Unholy Death Knight being a bit above 50% of its damage as pet damage, Demolock is even upwards of 70%, 75%, if not more damage coming from pets. So all that damage increase that these Demolocks are receiving doesn't actually show up properly as damage done by an Augmentation Evoker. But that's not all. That's not all, because augmentation was also not properly displaying, as mentioned by Blizzard, accumulator events like execution sentence, damage that pops later on. That wasn't properly displayed for augmentation, or delayed damage, dot damage in cases like, for example, ignite for fire mages. Even though, sure, that's a much weaker part of the damage done for a mage ignite, especially after the rework compared to the pet damage of Demonology Warlock, but still, you had a good amount of instances of damage not being properly logged by an Augmentation Evoker. So now that we are in this third reset of 10.1.5, we will be able to see a much closer, a much truer picture of how well Augmentation Evoker is performing. This is both a good thing and a bad thing. Is of course a good thing, because now you can unmask all of the fraud Augmentation Evokers who were pretending that I suck in damage, but that's just because the damage meters are bugged. That's just because my damage meter is not being properly displaying my damage, unfortunately. However, now it will. Now they will properly show the damage of augmentation. So if augmentation is OP, you better show it now in the meters, now that they are fixed, you know. We better see now. We better see this reset augmentation spike from absolutely bottom of the meters to at the very least here, okay? At the very least top half territory after this fix. Especially also given the changes, the tuning where they buffed their single target overall damage by themselves and nerfed the buffs they give to the rest of the party, which is going to be slightly better in the raid compared to the nerf in Mythic Plus. So that's a good thing. So now you can more properly assess the skill level of an Augmentation Evoker. Not that the rotation of augmentation is too complicated, to be fair, but still, there is now more room to be able to correctly judge how they are performing. It's also somewhat bad because it might, of course, unleash the real power of augmentation. It might highlight even more how powerful augmentation is, and also to some players who cared, it might even more so invalidate all of the logs that we have gotten so far in 10.1.5, because effectively many of these have been displaying the wrong types of damage, the wrong sources of damage, and the wrong amount of damage done to many of the specs, from Unholy to Demo to Beast Mastery Hunter, even things like the pets for an Enhancement Shaman or the Ignite ticking of a Fire Mage, some of the other abilities not properly being displayed as buffs from the augmentation. So it might annoy some players, the fact that up to now basically we were looking at a fake version of the damage meters and only now it's been properly fixed. And likely a bad thing for Augmentation Evokers as a whole, because now their real power supposedly is going to show up in the raid. You know, up to now most players kind of ignore them because they show up, of course, at the bottom of the meters in game. And then even when you go and look at the logs, augmentation is once more towards the bottom of the rankings anyways, so they don't feel OP. Okay, I know it's weird to say because in Mythic Plus, of course, they are OP, and for players who care about utility, about defensives, about survival, they're definitely strong, but when it comes to damage done, especially in the raid and not in a party, they feel like, you know, a happy little addition that boosts your numbers but doesn't do much by itself. Now, though, that we are getting this adjustment and their damage will be properly displayed for themselves, that wasn't previously being attributed to augmentation, we might see just exactly how powerful augmentation is in the raid. And now way more players might actually see them as they are, which is a threat for their Flavor of the Month spot, a threat for their DPS spot in the raid, because they are very powerful, and not just because they are funny little lizards that buff the rest of the players and don't do much damage by themselves. That is not going to stay as an image for the spec for much longer, now that we have gotten this fix. Still, a bit awkward from Blizzard. Here's my yellow card. If only I had anything yellow to show. There, I'm gonna show you this imaginary yellow card for Blizzard, because of course this might have been better to have been fixed before the patch actually came out and we actually had the full performance of augmentation already working properly, rather than having to wait the third reset of the patch before we finally got to see the real numbers of augmentation in the raid after this fix coming live, this reset. So that's the main point of today, having the real numbers of the damage of augmentation show up in the logs from this reset onwards. The main purpose of this is so that they can get nerfed further, basically. We will see, of course, if that will be the truth. We will see, of course, in the next few days how much the damage of an augmentation will improve now that the logs are properly showing their damage. So for now, what's left to do is wait and let all of the guilds go in the raid and clear some bosses with Augmentation Evokers in it to see the results. So for now, on this Wednesday, I'm going to leave you to the rest of your day. Thanks, of course, as usual, to all of the Patreon supporters for the contribution and the help to the growth of the channel, which you can still support completely for free. You can like and comment down below to help with the YouTube algorithm, and you can also subscribe to the channel itself. Now, with these things being said and done, we can now leave each other once more. Thank you guys again for watching. See you guys tomorrow. And in the meantime, I didn't expect the coldness. I forgot this is a thermal bottle. Jesus.